Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Lainey. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hello.
Hi.
Oh, congrats on your C item last
Thank
week.
you. That was a long day.
You had 2 long days because I had the meeting before that with the info briefing, and that was quite a long one as well. And you guys were at the very end of that one.
Yeah.
So.
And this time we were at the start and made everyone else wait.
But congratulations.
Thank you. That was big relief. So just wanting to see, we've got Bob, Kavika, Loyal. Michelle, is that you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you've got a strange name.
Let me change that. Sorry.
We don't have Melissa or Lisa.
Lisa is not going to be present for today.
Okay. Do we know if Melissa is joining us?
Yeah, she texted me and said she's stuck in traffic.
Oh,
She'll probably try to join on her phone, I'm assuming.
okay. Thanks, Kavika. Well, we could start. I don't want to keep people waiting. So, Miana, do you want to start go ahead and start and we'll announce.
The YouTube is already working.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so today it's March 29th. It's 9:03 a.m. I'm going to, oops. Oh, it's Melissa. Great, we've got Melissa too. So welcome everyone. This is the Endangered Species Recovery Committee public meeting. I'll just go through the introductions for the committee members. I'm Lainey Berry. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager, and I'm representing Department of Land and Natural Resources. Michelle, can you go next?
Good morning, everyone. Michelle Bogardus, representing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Oh, and also just I forgot, if there's anyone else in the room with you, can you let us know? There's no one else here with me.
There is no one else here with me.
Thank you. Loyal.
Well, I'm Merhoff, at-large ESRC member. There's no one here in the room with me.
Thank you. Bob.
Bob Reed, USGS, no one in the room with me.
Thank you. Melissa.
Good morning, Melissa Price, representative for UH, and there is no one in the room with me.
Okay, thank you. Kavika.
Kavika Winter, Hawaiian rep, nobody in the room with me.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call to order. And our item 1 is announcements. We've got a big announcement from DLNR. We have a new coordinator, so Protected Species Habitat Conservation Planning Coordinator has been filled, and that is Miana Gerald Perez. So congratulations, Miana. We're very, very excited. You've been doing a great job in your previous position. Mina's not feeling well today, so I'm guessing she's going to keep her camera off, but I know the committee members know her, and I'm sure they are very supportive of her and her position, so thank you for accepting, and we're really excited to be working with you in your new role. We're working on filling Miana's old position, so we know that's that there's a huge workload there, and we're going to try and get that filled as quickly as possible. Hey, did you have I think you had an announcement regarding Friday's ESRC meeting?
Hang on. I'm trying to make sure I don't have an echo with my phone and my computer at the same time.
Yeah, sounds good.
No specific announcement about Friday's meeting, except to tell the committee to double check the website. I'll send a link out because we do plan on updating with some additional meeting materials today and tomorrow. We're still PDFing some of the individual applicant reports or participant reports for Cary SHCP. I think 6 of the 8 are on there now. The joint one is on there as well. And I also wanted to give an update on KIUC, if that's possible. We are going to be scheduling some more meetings because, as you all know, we did not get to finish. The committee didn't actually get to deliberate on any of the significant portions of the HCP yet, and KIUC did not finish their presentation at the last meeting. So we are going to schedule a series of meetings with them as they identify further changes to their HCP, but I'm hoping that the first one, which will be to go over the things we didn't get to finish last time and allow the committee to provide detailed comments, will be in late April. So I'll be sending you a doodle poll out for that. And hopefully we can get that scheduled soon because we're trying to move forward quickly with that project. We did have the public hearing Monday in Kauai. Was that yesterday? No, 2 days ago. We had the public hearing. It was recorded on YouTube, so if anybody wants to watch it, it's there. There were no participation from the public or comments, but I will post that on our draft page, which I'll send you the link to as well. And under the draft page, I'll be posting all the public comments that have come in so far, which includes any comments that were sent by anyone in the committee to the rest of the committee. Those are public comments as well. And I think we've gotten at least 3 sets from NGOs and 1 or 2 sets of comments from individuals. So I'll be posting all those for you to peruse, and I'll summarize those in a spreadsheet for our next KIUC meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. And did you have, sorry, you're going to mention something about the Kauai Nene HCP?
Yeah, I may as well do that now so I don't have to worry about getting a parking ticket later, not being able to feed the meter. We do have a strong push right now to make some progress on a programmatic statewide Nene HCP. There have been a lot of injuries of Nene recently, especially by golf courses, and there's also there's a lot of need for permitting on Kauai specifically, where Nene have been really doing much better and are becoming a challenge for a lot of the landowners to deal with. So we are going to be putting together a proposal that we'll bring to you guys for comment before it's fully fleshed out. But that will probably also be on one of the upcoming meetings in the next month or so. We'll bring you the draft and our thoughts on how we can develop a statewide recovery and conservation plan that different applicants can choose more best management practices for their own properties or for mitigation actions. So you'll be hearing about that soon as well.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions for what Kate just went through regarding KIUC and the Kauai Nene HCP? Okay, great. And then, Kate, finally, I think you were going to clarify something for item 4, the permitted integration group item for today.
We do have our AG on board for that one, so I think we'll let her go first, and then I will ask the committee, or you can, if they have any specific subject matters that they want to think about for the next meeting.
Wait, sorry, are we doing item 4 now? Is that what you said?
No, just I think what I meant was I think we're just going to clarify that we're not going to have, there was a vote on the agenda, but I believe we're not going to go ahead with the vote today. So I just wanted to clarify that there's no vote on the agenda now. And yeah,
and just so the committee knows, that's because of the sunshine rules. We can't have a voting item on our agenda without providing significant or at least sufficient information on the public agenda for the public to know what it is we're discussing.
Mm.
And we didn't feel that we had put enough information on our agenda this time to clarify what we would be voting on. So we have taken vote off. And we'll just be discussing what these permitted interaction groups are, how they work, and whether they could be useful to the committee in the future.
Okay, Ed, I believe a while back, we had requested that agendas always include an open discussion item for us to talk about things in general about how ESRC is working, what our rules are, and it seems like that's not happening. I think that's really important that there was an email string, and Loyal brought up some good points that we need to discuss. I would really love to discuss those today, and be a bummer if we couldn't because it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Cindy?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, apologies for that. I'm not sure if you were there, but we did have a beginning of that discussion last meeting. But we didn't get very far, admittedly, and we will, point taken, and we will make sure that is on the agenda. We'll reach out and sort of get some clarification on what it is that the committee members are looking for, and we'll definitely put that on the agenda for next time.
So does that mean we're not able to talk about it today? We not have an open discussion?
I don't. Cindy, do you want to take that?
So it's not agended in a way that you can vote to create a specific permitted interaction group for a specific, say, project. That would need to either be agended if a permitted interaction group is something that's anticipated, it probably would be better to have that somewhere in the title. If it's not anticipated but comes up in the context of a discussion item on a particular project, then that could be a possibility of creating a permitted interaction group. It kind of depends on how each item is agendized, but the way that your agenda is done today, it's review of the plan is your first item for Oahe. Then there's update on several HCPs. That wouldn't be sufficient to create a permitted interaction group for any of those items. So I think the intention in item 4 at this point, given the title, was to have a more general discussion about what permitted interaction groups are and what's required in order to create them and for them to move forward. It's a 3-meeting arc. We can get into it in item 4.
No,
Yes.
I understand the pig part of it. My question was just about open discussion on just general things, not having to do with the pig, but just what our needs are from staff so that we can do our jobs or fulfill our roles on the board. We never make time to talk about those things, and we need to talk about those things. So can we just have an open discussion that's not related to any single HCP or any single action, but just more about how we work together?
Okay, so there could be a topic on, say, sunshine law, or some kind of broad topic that you can talk about, but kind of there's no such thing as a free-for-all open discussion kind of item. That's actually been looked at by OIP, and OIP has advised other boards and commissions that title is, you can't just kind of cram everything in there and just have it be a free-for-all discussion. So it really, open discussion type of agenda items really don't help to have that kind of discussion. But if you want something kind of broader to talk about more general types of matters, the committee members can work with staff, or can let staff know what types of things they want to see on the agenda.
Okay,
So
I
could
understand.
we just have an open wrap up at the end where, it's next steps discussion before we adjourn? I think that's kind of what Kavik is getting at, is if we don't really know exactly, but we would want to wrap up at the end of every meeting to say, okay, here's where we are now, here's where we'd like to go for the next meeting, and before we adjourn, we'll just have that short discussion. Do we need to agendize that in order to just do that?
That's fine, as long as it's, you know, if it's not something that's on the agenda. I mean, for example, if you're doing an update on these, you know, listed HCPs, and you have a discussion about what's going to be next at the end of the agenda for those 5. Well, I guess I'm sorry, 4 HCPs and technically 1 SHA. But if you have that type of wrap up, but it's up, you know, the last item is not necessarily a free for all to talk about. I mean, I guess you could say this is what we plan on having on the next agenda if you wanted to say have a announcement, but it really wouldn't be the time to talk about those items. It would just be more of an announcement, like this is what we anticipate being on the next agenda if you wanted to have that type of announcement. I guess it depends on what the announcement would be. Yeah.
So I'm personally getting pretty frustrated about suggesting ideas for discussion for the ESRC group on topics that I think are important, big picture topics for how we work. And those don't show up. So, you know, I'm very disappointed in that. So I don't really know what to do. And, you know, I don't know really whether I need to participate just because I'm just not seeing the ability for us to get together and talk about substantive discussions on just the overall ESRC. Just letting you know, I'm
I think what Loyal's saying,
pretty upset about that.
He has communicated with staff requesting agenda items and they never show up. And so we show up to these things hoping to talk about them, but we end up not being able to. And so it really hamstrings our ability to fulfill the roles that we're supposed to do here.
Okay, yeah, apologies for that. We'll try to stay on top of that in the future. I get your message. But Loyal, regarding your comment about like a general discussion of the ESRC role, and I know that I remember that coming up in the past, but from what Cindy was saying, that I'm not sure if there's specific things that, like topics, it sounds like we can agenda those, but it sounds like we cannot agenda a just general discussion of the role of the ESRC. But definitely if there's certain, you know, so specific, more specific topics, we can, it sounds like we can, such as the permitted interaction groups, for example, we can agenda those.
Some boards and commissions, for example, the burial councils, have an item periodically on their agendas that have to do with discussion on roles, responsibilities of, in that case, the burial council. In your case, you could have discussion regarding the roles, something kind of general. It probably, I mean, those items are generally non-action items, and they're agendized as such. They do indicate that it's a non-action item. So that's a possibility for your agenda if you want to have something broader.
Okay, maybe Cindy, I'll reach out with you and just make sure I understand what it is we can and can't do.
Okay.
And we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, sure.
Well, and as a staff member, I'd like to request that if there are things that people would like to see on the agendas, we are usually managing a lot of different things during these meetings, and we're taking the best notes we can. We do not always devote the work time to go back and watch the entire video to catch everything. So if you do have things you want us to put on the agendas, please just shoot us an email. That would make our lives so much easier. Very easy for us to track. We know exactly what everybody wants, and we can communicate with you guys by email. That would definitely help.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to move on if there's any other questions or comments on that. I'd like to move on to item 2, which is the review of the Oahu Draft 1 Horibat Tier 5 site-specific implementation plan. And this is a request to the committee for comments and recommendations. And there's an agency submittal. So I'd like to turn it over to George and Matt.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can everyone hear me and see this video or this screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for calling in and meeting up today. I appreciate everyone's time, and I'm glad everyone was able to make it today. And Cindy, let me know if it's okay to present this today. But yeah, I'm just kidding, guys. I'm gonna present it, and you guys saw the draft posted online. This is the Oahe Wind Tier 5 Site-Specific Mitigation Implementation Plan, the SSMIP, or the plan. On the call today, you have myself, Georgia Cow, the project biologist here at Oahe Wind, and Matt Stelmack supporting me here, the American Electric Power Oahe Wind too. This plan is many years, many different eyes and people contributed to this plan. This is the service and the DOFA staff, HCP staff, DOFA Maui, Haleakala Ranch, and even you guys as early on with the HCP amendment. So 2019, 2014, we were working through the HCP amendment. In 2019, the HCP amendment was approved, and in 2019, Kamehameha Forest was identified for Tier 5 and Tier 6 bat mitigation. The similar criteria that we're going to propose as used for Tier 4, and implement actions known to have positive benefits for bats. We were committed to improve 690 acres of habitat for Tier 5. As part of the approval, some of the requirements by the ESRC needed to require sufficient, specificity of what the actions would be there. There's one of the comments pretty interesting from way back then, years ago. I feel that this is generally sounds like a good strategy, but it really depends on how well the Tier 4 management progresses and if the monitoring can detect any change as a result of these management actions. So moving forward, management actions, Tier 1 and 4, we do it. We're doing it. We're putting out trees, creating hedgerows, creating water features, outplanting. So what does this mean? What oh, okay, you're doing this, George. Oahe, what kind of benefit? Oh, I don't know. Tier 4 results. We've been monitoring over the years. We've been, building ponds and we put cameras and see bats using the ponds, eating and drinking. We put out acoustic detectors throughout the mitigation area, and we're seeing the abundance of call abundance increasing throughout the years. So, what are the commitments for Tier 5? So here's now in the Tier 5 plan, we have a little more detail of the goals, the actions, the monitoring, success criteria. We want to increase roosting, foraging, prey availability, make good bat habitat, outplant native tree species, water features, acoustic monitoring, insect monitoring. We identify success criteria based off all these different monitoring and approvals, and hopefully development of this plan. So that was the commitments from the HCP amendment. Now, what are the commitments in this plan relative to the commitments plan? So in this plan, you have in front of you or online, should identify baseline habitat conditions, the specific location types of actions, the timing, the timeline, success criteria, the monitoring, the adaptive management, how the mitigation will offset take, and cost estimates. So what did it take to get to this point in the plan, or this draft of the plan? So in 2019, ESRC approved the amendment. Then in 2020, we started beginning planning of the plan. This plan, SSMIP, provides some documents to, or DOFA provides closing docs to OAHI. We get, tier 4, implement tier 4. We're starting tier 4. We're planning tier 5. We're, doing all the tier 4 stuff. That's crazy already. But yep. Then we 2021, we start monitoring pre-trigger baseline monitoring begins in 2021, and then later that year we trigger tier 5 planning, and then later that year we provide funding assurances for tier 5, and we provide the first draft of tier 5 of this plan. And throughout the years, the last 2 years, we've provided 5 drafts and multiple meetings, and this meeting here, and hopefully this year we get approval and we get to implement tier 5. So the mitigation area, the baseline conditions. This we identify 690 acres in the yellow there on the map, the reserve or future reserve. Elevation is between 4,900 and 7,600 feet. The majority of the area below 6,500 feet is pasture. It was all grazing lands, ranch lands, everything in that parcel. There is existing grazing and feral ungulates throughout the parcel. And the land cover, here's some breakdown of the land cover types. There's a small grove of evergreen trees there, about 3% from this data set here, and majority is.
Hey, George, sorry to interrupt, but I'm having a hard time following where the words you're saying and what is on the map. Are you able to put with your cursor, because it's too small for me to read what those different colors represent? Yeah, now we can see your cursor. So when you're talking about an area, could you put your cursor over it, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, maybe the colors here. I think the evergreen shrub forest should be, I guess, on this area, and then the scrub, and this is cultivated land in this data set. So, but about 3% trees right now. Commitments in our plan here is to increase the roosting, foraging, and pre-availability or insects in the mitigation area. The actions include outplanting, water features, removing invasive species. Monitoring is acoustic monitoring, some forest cover monitoring, thermal monitoring, and insect monitoring. So yeah, there's a picture of that evergreen trees in the distance there. And this picture is just looking back at the road there to drive up to the Crater National Park. Success criteria is acoustic, based off the acoustic monitoring, the fencing that's maintained, the monitoring, hopefully is implemented and showing an increase in bat activity, increase in forest cover, installation of egress structures in a pond, and thermal monitoring, and summarizing and reporting to you guys yearly on all these efforts and where we're at. Here's the timeline of the plan where we're proposing. When we this year plan to hopefully begin and start some monitoring, start the planning for the pond, the ungulate exclusion and removal, acoustic monitoring, and assessing forest cover. Plan identifies adaptive management, planting alternative species, outplanting species if indicated. They're doing showing good results with the insect and acoustic monitoring, and and any other actions needed informed by the monitoring results. So this is hopefully what the plan should address, or the topics that it should address. I had this earlier in the presentation, but going through it again, it's what you have in front of you, or the plan should address baseline conditions. Hopefully we got a check off for that, the specific location, type of work, the timing, success criteria, everything. I hope, our goal is to check all those boxes and make sure we have all that within this plan. And yeah, we did receive the DOFA comments, so there should be another round of that. And yeah, no, that's it. Keeping it short. Well, hopefully, we've been working on things that benefit bats out here in Maui, tier 1 through 4, and tier 5 is something that hopefully can be, replicate similar results as tier 1 through 4, showing benefits to bats. And overall, that's the general strategy of the plan. Thanks, guys.
I'd like to add to George's closing statement there, just that since we started planning for tier 5, we've exceeded the tier 4 authorization. And so there is a bit of urgency to the need to begin implementation for our tier 5 mitigation. So we're hoping that we can come away with comments that would allow us to receive approval from U.S. Fish and Wildlife and DOFA HCP staff to begin implementation.
Yeah, I have some questions, but George, you'd have to put your slides back up, if that's okay. If you could go back to we'll have 2 burning questions. One, but you need to pull up the map that I was asking about, where there was color coding, the GIS one. But my number 1 question was, you showed some slides about the efficacy of tier 4, I believe it was, with the images of the bats drinking and stuff. Do you folks, or do we have any quantified evidence of increasing bat populations? Or
yeah, our annual report from last year includes the analysis from West, which showed an increase in bat acoustic activity over the baseline monitoring. I didn't go through to review the power. I know that was one of the criteria that we include, but the difference was significant.
okay, Georgia, are you able to put the show back up with that slide?
Sorry, yeah, let me, I thought I was sharing screen. Hold on.
So yeah, I think I'll just start my question. Oh, that's a good one.
Is that the one you're looking for?
Well, that's decent. So in this one, we're looking at, is this tier 4 mitigation areas? Both those red polygons?
Yes.
And so where is tier 5? Is tier 5 on this map, or it's a completely different area?
Tier 5 is north, not included on this map.
Similar elevation or a higher elevation? It's higher.
I don't recall the elevation from tier 4, but I can look for you.
It's probably a little higher, I'm guessing.
So on that map that shows kind of the mountain, could you kind of give us no, the next one, I think, yeah, right? No.
Sorry, Nick.
That one, yeah. So could you show us on there where tier 4 is and where tier 5 is?
Tier 4 is the sorry, this whatever, light blue or cyan color, and then the yellow is tier 5 proposed. Or yeah.
Is that on the other side of the summit?
It's like leeward Haleakala, yeah, the like windward side, or the lee once you cross this ridge, I guess you're kind of on the lee side.
Can you just hover your cursor over where the crater is? Just want to make sure I'm seeing this right. Okay.
I mean, yeah, national. So Haleakala National Park is green. That gives you a reference.
Okay. And then where are the turbines are on the other side? Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I'll yield to another member.
Just Melissa and Bob have their hands up. Just wanted to announce, like, we're so we're finished with the presentation. We're going for comments and recommendations now. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you. Can you back up that previous slide and just a clarification question on the graph that you're showing with the increase? So year 0, I know often the detectors are not deployed all at once, and it takes a little while to get them out. And so I'm just wondering, is that like it's a little hard to read there. So I see you've standardized it by bat calls per detection night. Were they put out over the same seasons? Does it essentially encompass the same time scale? I know it's standardized by calls per night, so that's great, but I know that there's seasonal changes in activity. So does it encompass the same time periods between year 1 and year 2? And was there a statistical difference between year 0 and year 1?
Yeah, for the methods, yeah, they're deployed all, I think, within a month. I got to go back. It's in the annual report, I think a couple years ago. It's a year-round monitoring at all the locations. And I think there was a couple of detectors added from the first season from baseline. But yeah, a lot more detail. Wes did the report. Wes provides all the statistical analysis, and they did see a overall mean call abundance increase from 10.9 in year 0 to 14.6. I think is what's showing in here, and I think from those bars it looks significant, but I would have to go back to the report.
Okay, so just the follow up on that is, I was curious your opinion. I know you're saying it's all in the report from West, and I get that, but one of the things with bats that we've been concerned about over time is this could simply be showing that you're drawing in bats from other places and not necessarily that you're producing an increase in bats to make up for the losses due to the wind farms. And so I'm just wondering whether you can talk a little bit about, with a year further of experience, how the plan moving forward can ensure that we're actually increasing the number of bats, not just increasing the number in this area because they've shifted over from a different area.
We talked in detail about this in the HCP amendment process. And my thought initially is that if we are able to support additional bats in this area that have been drawn in from outside areas, that leaves those habitats that the bat left for new bats to occupy. And so in a sense, that is a success in our mind.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Thanks. I think everyone agrees this is a thorny problem because we have zero information on how Opea respond to habitat management, right? But I did solicit comments from some of our bat biologists, and I'll go through some of those, including some questions about efficacy of certain things. One of them is about koa. Everyone loves koa. It grows fast, and you can see your results real fast. But we have no information from Maui on roost site selection, so we rely on information from Hawaii Island. And on Hawaii, even when koa is the dominant or co-dominant tree, we've never observed bats roosting in them. And the vegetation is really thin, and it doesn't provide them much cover. So koa may well change the invertebrate community, and it may provide opportunities for understory and midstory. All of those may be good for insect resources, but planting koa alone does not really provide you opportunities for increased roosting, which means that if you want to have roost sites in the area, you really might want to consider leaving in the eucalyptus, leaving in the evergreens, those non-native large trees that have really dense vegetation cover. So, that's one point. Similarly, taking ungulates out usually helps with vegetation in Hawaii, but we don't know how that changes prairie resources. So we're left thinking that, well, all in all, it's more likely to be a positive than a negative. Let's see. There are some statements in there that we don't feel are really backed up by the literature. You know, when there's a general statement like Pea is an edge habitat specialist and open water body forager. You know, that's speculative. So I'd like to see more reliance on the literature, including some of the recent literature. We were surprised that some of the newer bat mitigation research by either USGS or HT Harvey on Maui, especially with diet, wasn't included in the background here. And there were some comments on distinguishing between any noise made by a bat and actual foraging behavior. So looking at just call abundance and activity rates doesn't really mean foraging. And so if you're trying to figure out how the bats respond to foraging enhancements, then focusing on feeding buzzes is probably pretty important. And that feeds back to some of the adaptive management. It was unclear on what the goal is. You know, what's when you say, well, we're going to see how vegetation changes affect bat activity. Well, bat activity measured how? So we would suggest that feeding buzzes are important if you're looking at prairie resources. And then what's the directionality and the vegetation composition that you think you want to be aiming for if you think a change is necessary? Let's see. We do have another recent paper, not authored by our folks, that we'll pass along that has some good references on how habitat management can change bat behavior. I agreed with Melissa's comments that call abundance is not the same as bat abundance. That needs to be maybe teased out a little more. And I'll probably have a few more in a few minutes, but I think that's my initial comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Loyal?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I do have some questions and comments and concerns, so I'll try to run through them. I am still concerned, and we've debated this, Matt, previously when we were going through the the amendment to the HCP, but I still don't agree with the small number of acres per bat. You're looking at 34 bats, I think, on this tier, right? So it's 20 acres of habitat that's in your mitigation site, and of that, about 20% or so is going to be in forest, right? So you're going to, it just seems like I don't see any good support for 20 acres as being an appropriate level of mitigation for habitat mitigation, especially considering we don't have a good link between, how much mitigation is done for habitat from a habitat perspective and how that relates to individual bats. So when I look at this area, you're going to plant, what is 138 acres of trees. That's 4 acres per bat of trees that are going to get planted. I know that there's the whole ecosystem you're looking at, but it doesn't seem like a very compelling effort to offset 34 bats. You're using somebody else's land. They're putting in the fence. You're planting some koa trees that may or may not necessarily be the best species to put out there. And it just doesn't seem like a real strong package to try to offset 34 bat takes. So that's my first overall statement on it. Seems to be needing more than what you've done so far. And it's going to be really hard in my mind to parse out what your contribution to the conservation or the restoration of this land, how that really is going to impact, that, again, that benefit to the bats, considering that, again, somebody else has acquired the land, somebody else has put in the fence, you have to do the ungulate control, and then the putting in the trees. So that's a pretty big concern of mine. And I didn't see a support letter from DOFA and the stuff that I got sent from Maui DOFA on that. I don't know exactly what the plans are for that site as to whether it's supposed to go into mesic forest or what it is that DOFA was planning for that area. But I'm a little concerned if you're trying to go shoot for a 20 to 25% canopy on that one in that area, that almost 700 acre area. What happens when the rest of it grows up, and if it grows up into trees? You're going to be looking at trying to reduce that back down to 20% or 25%, and is DOFA Maui okay with that in there? Let's see, another concern is, you're doing some pre-restoration monitoring. We've got 2 sites, but one site's on the boundary, not inside, not very far inside, if at all, inside the restoration area, and the other one is clearly outside. So I was wondering why you didn't put the pre-mitigation monitoring in the middle of the site where you're going to be actually doing stuff. And in addition, I'm uncomfortable for sure having a set of success criteria that are basically just actions, with the only thing that really is pertaining to the bat benefits, if you will, is an increase, any increase at all in activity. And I just don't think that gives me the confidence that you're going to be really offsetting a take of 34 bats. So those are kind of my big ones. We've got smaller things that I don't need to go into here, but those are my biggest concerns.
Thanks very much, Loyal. That's a great, helpful summary. Do we have any other questions, comments, recommendations? See, Bob, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah. Just thinking about this site, Music mid elevation, 5,000 to 7,500 feet. It's yet another mitigation site that probably provides no pupping habitat, because as far as we know, the pupping almost entirely occurs below 1,000 feet, 1,000 meters, sorry. And so just a more general thought for ESRC is, are we whittling away at a vital resource as we prove multiple mitigation areas that don't provide that resource? So that loss of low elevation pupping habitat is awfully important for the species, and should perhaps be stated in a plan like this, saying, we acknowledge that this is not meeting the needs of the species for this important life stage. And so we are focusing on other important pieces. And if that's foraging habitat, then the foraging aspect of behavior has to be explicitly looked at. If it's roosting habitat, then the vegetation required for roosting has to be explicitly looked at. And one of the objectives says that the objective of the mitigation actions will be to increase bat night roosting and foraging habitat and prey availability. The night roosting part is a little weird to us. We don't know why that term was used. some day roosts are used as night roosts, but not always. That's not always the case, and night roosts may not be used as day roosts. So cleaning up some of that terminology to put it in context of actual bat behavior would be really helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Oh, Loyal, did you have a question, or I saw you put your hand down? Sorry. Okay, thanks.
Lainey, are we going to have a chance for the folks to respond to the comments that Loyal and Bob made just now?
Sure. Yeah. Matt and George, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Just to put your minds at ease, we have been working with Lance at DOFA Maui. He'll be the forestry manager, and the HCP staff has also been coordinating with them. Certainly, we want to optimize the resources for bats, but we are constrained by DOFA's management as well. So we're trying to make a plan that optimizes both, or at least we can optimize to the maximum degree for bats while maintaining no conflicts with DOFA's planned management. That may limit the ability to maintain some of the roost trees that you've identified, Bob, but we will work with DOFA to see what we can do. And to clarify, night roosting is more like the rest and digest portion. So after foraging, that's my understanding from speaking with experts like Karina and other folks in USGS, is that after eating, bats frequently rest at a night roost until returning to an appropriate day roost. And we don't think that the COA is expected to provide day roosting opportunities, but which is why we clarified that it would be night roosting. Regarding the use of feeding buzzes, when looking at overall feeding buzzes, it's a small fraction of the overall number of calls. And given the importance of statistical validity for needing to meet the success criteria, we didn't place an emphasis on feeding buzzes, although they are analyzed in our review of the acoustic data. We were worried about the ability to detect a change given the sample size. Let's see. I'm trying to see. Loyal expressed a concern about the acres per bat, and we did have extensive discussion about acreage per bat during the HCP amendment, and ultimately the ESRC agreed that the acreage-based offset was appropriate and voted to approve the HCP amendment. The mitigation actions and success criteria essentially align with what were approved for our Tier 4 management plan, which is why we've chosen to use those again. We had some other options for mitigation, but because this was identified, basically mirroring what we had done at Tier 4 and utilizing that at Kamehameha, which was identified in the HCP amendment, that seemed the clearest path for approval of a mitigation plan. And so we wanted to streamline the process as much as possible, as opposed to reinvent the wheel and try to work through all the details of that. We wanted to utilize the template of something that was existing. The selection of the pre-restoration monitoring sites was done after DOFA's acquisition of the project, before DOFA had established a management plan. Our assumption is that bat activity is relatively homogeneous through the whole parcel. I mean, at least within the elevation bands, but that selection of one site was as good as we could get, not knowing exactly where our mitigation actions would be implemented. And it was only over the course of the next 2 years that we narrowed down the scope, location, and mitigation actions that we would implement and where. Those 2 baseline monitoring sites were utilized to identify an appropriate number of acoustic detectors And we use that to increase the number of detectors from the commitment of 9 in the HCP amendment to 14. And the success criteria, again, are mirroring what was already approved in Tier 4. So I don't know if I answered every question, but those were the ones that I had notes for, or the comments that I had noted.
Are there any lands in the pupping zone that we could look at for possible mitigation that you guys have control over?
Not as a part of the Kamehame Nui, which is identified as the site for our Tier 5 mitigation. If we chose to use different lands, it would require adaptive management and identifying a different parcel for mitigation for Tier 5.
Matt, you're in the early process of identifying mitigation projects for Tier 6, is that correct?
Certainly, when we initially started this process, we wanted both Tier 5 and Tier 6 to be identified, but it became obvious that the inclusion of both Tier 5 and Tier 6 was complicating the discussion, and so we removed Tier 6 from planning so that we could focus just on the immediate need. But certainly, we are planning to move to Tier 6 planning as soon as we get approval for Tier 5.
What is your hand up from before?
No, it's a new one. Yeah, so I know we did have a lot of discussion on the size amount. And I know when we were talking about Tier 4 and the actual amendment process, if I remember correctly, and somebody with a better memory like Michelle may catch this, but I thought we said that we would live with the Tier 4 at that level, but also we're lumping into the mitigation. One of the studies that you were doing, I think it was a West study on Maui, as a part of that to help compensate for the low acreage on those mitigations, on that particular mitigation site. So I don't think that was then a complete carryover of just the acreage into Tier 5, personally. Is my recollection on that, but I'd have to go back and look at my notes on it, to be honest.
I would have to go back and look at my notes too, Loyal. The discussion of Tier 5 has been going on for a couple of years now, and so I can't recall the differentiation between the discussion on Tier 4 versus Tier 5. I'll see if I can find my notes.
Yeah, I know, another aspect of this is just the fact that, you're not doing the fencing on this. DOFA's already done that. And it seems like if you are going to be wanting to work in this particular parcel, there's areas that are downslope that are unfenced. And I don't know whether or not Lance and DOFA and Maui are going to try to fence those areas or not, and what they're trying to do in those areas. But that may seem more appropriate from my perspective,
The reason
since there's already fenced, an area.
The reason we selected this area was because the phase 1, DOFA has broken the parcel up into 2 phases. Phase 1 is Mauka of that fence line, and phase 2 is Makai. And DOFA still has an existing grazing lease on the phase 2 areas, and that wouldn't be revoked until a later time. I have not been a part of DOFA's discussions with the rancher, but essentially those areas are not available to be utilized.
Okay, thanks for all that information. My concerns still stand, but I appreciate the response.
Is there any more questions or comments or any additional recommendations from the committee?
Yeah, I have one, sorry. So cumulative net benefit, we're trying to make sure that tier 5 mitigation has a cumulative net benefit for the amount of bats that were lost that got us here. So what is that number that we are mitigating for? I'm sorry if I missed that earlier.
34 bats in tier 4 or tier 5.
Thank you. So the question is this mitigation plan going to have a cumulative net benefit to the entire population in regards to 35 lost bats? So. Jim, just need to clarify that. Thank you.
Anything else from the committee on item 2?
Sorry, could you just pull up that slide again that showed the what the mitigation is exactly? Is it like Loyal was saying, DOFA's already done or has committed to do the fencing, so you folks are just planting koa trees in 20 acres? Or was there also the water features and things like that?
Yeah, so we're proposing to plant 138 acres of koa, or koa intermixed with some small percentage of other trees. And then we're also installing a pond. The pond will be installed on adjacent Haleakala Ranch lands.
Is that next to the existing ponds?
No, it's north of the Kamehameha Nui site, so opposite side as the existing ponds.
Okay, sorry, could you guys, or they be allowed to pull the slide back up to show? So what was the 20 acres about then? If you guys are outplanting 138 acres?
I think Loyal was referring to the acreage-based offset of 20 acres approximately.
I see.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Was it, you want to bring up that slide 2, I think?
Yeah, whatever slide it was that described what the actual proposed tier 5 mitigation is. Thank you, I'm just reading.
George, this is the HCP amendment. Can you step forward to the commitments in the SSMIP? Oh, can you go back one? There you go.
Thank you. And which color polygon is this referring to again?
The yellow polygon.
Okay, thanks.
The orange is the outline for the entire Kamehameha Nui parcel. And the yellow is the subsection that we would manage for tier 5.
The orange area is fenced?
There are some fences along the existing boundaries, but the lower boundary of the tier 5 mitigation area would be a new fence, and then DOFA is planning to continue that fence along the existing Kula Forest Reserve, which extends Mauka from that fence line.
Maybe while you have that pulled up, Matt, just a clarification question. So there's 138 acres of koa that you're planting for 34 bats, which works out to something like 4 acres per bat. How do we get to 20 acres per bat? Can you just walk us through?
The acreage base offset is essentially identifying the needs or the space requirements, but in the HCP amendment, we detail the needs of the Hawaiian hoary bat in relation to the overall ecosystem. And it's not just forest that bats need, it's the diversity of forest and open spaces to provide available insect prey base and foraging opportunities. So open edge foraging tends to be preferred among hoary bats, and there's a number of studies that were cited in the HCP amendment that detail the habitat density of forest that optimize that forest open space mix. And we utilize those studies as the basis. And so far, the Tier 4 mitigation has seemingly increased bat activity in the area, showing positive associations from that management in the past.
Okay, so I'll need help from folks who are better with the requirements of connecting the mitigation actions per bat killed. But it sounds to me, if I'm understanding you, which I may be misunderstanding, it sounds to me like the mitigation you're doing is outplanting the COA, which works out to habitat improvements that are equivalent to about 4 acres per bat. The calculation is based on 20 acres per bat, so you're kind of taking advantage of this, like Loyal was pointing out earlier, the actions that other folks are taking and kind of maybe counting those toward the benefit that you're calculating. Am I misunderstanding something?
The goal is to optimize the habitat for bats and increasing, so 100% closed canopy. If you look at that HD Harvey study, I think, which is what Bob was referencing earlier, HD Harvey found that bats actually bypass closed canopy forests. And so we're looking to create optimal foraging habitat to reduce the energy needed for these bats to meet their foraging needs. So as opposed to create closed canopy habitat, we're looking to create an optimized matrix.
Okay, I'll spend a little time thinking about that. And why I had my hand, that was more a follow-up question on Kavika's question, but why I had my hand raised is just a final thing that I think, you know, what's always, I've been on the committee, I don't know, 4 years now or so. And what's interesting to me is then seeing these plans, you know, now the next year you come back and you show us the results of that, what you've done over the last year, right? And so, you can expect that what I'll continue to ask for is a demonstration that it's actually increasing the number of bats and not just drawing in bats from other places. And I think that speaks to Bob's comment about, you know, feeding buzzes versus detections and some things like that. So I really want to see that written into the plan so that I'm not frustrated next year by saying, you know, like, okay, I still don't see how this is actually compensating for the loss of bats. And so anyways, just want to make sure that kind of monitoring is built into this plan so we don't get frustrated next year.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have one. Matt had, I think earlier mentioned that he was hoping to get some feedback that allows him to kind of go back and work with both DOFA and Fish and Wildlife Service. So based upon, I think, Cindy's discussion earlier, we have to put that on an agenda item. Is that right, for a future thing to do that, for a future meeting to make that set of recommendations?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure, and I'll try to be clearer this time. So I think Matt talked about wanting to have kind of an accelerated timeline to get feedback that would, quote unquote, or I shouldn't say quote, paraphrasing, allow him to work with Fish and Wildlife Service and DOFA to move forward on their mitigation. So what does that look like as far as what we need to do in the ESRC?
Well, my understanding was that's what this is for. But you can submit written comments, and that's very welcome.
Awahi was requested to present the SSMIP by Jim at the last meeting, and so staff followed up on Jim's request that we make this presentation to provide an opportunity for ESRC to comment. We will take the comments we received today and continue to work with DOFA and HCP staff, or Fish and Wildlife and DOFA HCP staff, to get a plan that meets their approval.
So really, you just need comments from us. Really, that's about all it amounts to.
Comments and recommendations, yeah. Cindy, were you going to say something?
Oh, just exactly what you said. Yes.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, just one more comment on something Matt said. I think, you know, I'm the one who brought up the Harvey study, like you said, and you mentioned that on Maui anyway, that showed that there was avoidance of closed canopy forests. I do think it's important to look at the totality of evidence for activity and not make too many hard and fast decisions on that. On Hawaii Island anyway, some of the highest bat activity levels were in closed canopy native forest. And so talking about, you know, the type of forest that is the anticipated, you know, end product and the structure of it is probably going to affect activity levels more than just, you know, a binary, is it closed forest, is it open forest. So thinking about some nuance there with where the forest is going to go over time, and thus what species mix do you want to put in there. That should be part of how you look at success and whether it's going to result in activity measures you're interested in, with the caveat we mentioned before that, you know, not all activity is the same. So yeah, just comment, and we can have some of the, you know, biology specific comments written up later. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. I do want to, if there's no other input from the committee, I just wanted to check with Kate and Mina to see if there's any public comments or questions online or in person.
No questions or comments from the public.
Thanks, Mina. So I think we're finished on item 2. If there's nothing else. We've had a request to take a 10-minute break prior to moving on to item 3. So I'd like to reconvene at 10:25.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate everyone's recommendations, and you know, look forward to doing some implementation, doing some new cities better, plant some trees. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can the committee members turn their cameras on so I can see who's here? I've got Bob, Loyal, Rebecca, Cindy. Just waiting on Michelle and Melissa. Oh, no, Michelle said she's going to be out till 11. Okay, so just Melissa. There you are. Great, thank you. Okay, so we have quorum. So I'm going to move on to item 3, which is the update on the current habitat conservation plans and safe harbor agreements under development. This presentation for the first 3 HCPs is going to be given by Mirna, but because she was not feeling well, she's going to, she was very kindly has done a pre-recording, and she's going to play that, and then we have the participants, sorry, the license holders available for questions. So Mirna, can you go ahead? Thanks.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Can you hear it? The pre-recording. I'm gonna hit play and see if you can hear the pre-recorded section.
Okay.
ESRC
Yes.
agenda item.
Just one question, Mirna. Are you going to play all 3, just so that the committee members know when they can ask questions? Are you going to play the 3 HCP presentations in a row? Okay. So
and at the end, open it for questions.
Okay, great. So thank you. So committee members, if you can hold your questions until at the end of the presentation. All right, go ahead. Thanks, Mirna. We can't hear anything.
When you share screen, you need to click on the boxes at the bottom. It gives you an option for clicking on some boxes that says optimize for video, optimize for audio. And so if you click on those 2 boxes, it'll make sure that it's sharing the audio from the video. But I think you have to unshare and then reshare to see those options.
Okay.
I'll give them a thumbs up when we that we can hear.
Hi everyone, this is a pre-recorded meeting for the March 29 ESRC meeting agenda item number 3, where I will be providing an update on 3 wind farms, 3 HCP wind farms that are currently under development. 3 wind farms we're going to be covering for today include the Javi Wind Farm, Pininui Wind Farm, and Lalanimila Wind Farm, all located on the island of Hawaii. And we will start with Javi. The Javi Renewable Development LLC owns and operates the project. The wind farm is located in the North Kohala district near the northwestern tip of the island of Hawaii. It is a 10.56 megawatt operational wind energy facility. The project consists of 16 Vestas V47 660 kilowatt wind turbines. Each turbine is 37 meters tall, and the total height of each turbine is 60.5 meters. Construction of the project began in 2005 and commercial operation began in April of 2006. Public Utility Commission approval of a new power purchase agreement for repowering started in October of 2022, and completion of that refurbishment is expected to end by the end of 2023. The repowering and refurbishing plan consists of refurbishing and rehabilitating the existing generators, gearboxes, and blades to extend the useful life for an additional 20 years, installing new transformers at each generator, upgrading the on-site substation, and no changes to the turbines. The turbine height or blades will occur. The following pictures are aerial images of the Javi wind farm. The requested ITL duration will consist of operations from the time of permit issuance for 20 years and an additional approximately 6 months of decommissioning activities. Take estimates are based on 20.5-year term consisting of 20 years of operations and 6 months to remove above ground facilities. Javi has determined that the incidental take of 4 species could occur from the continued operations of the project. These 4 species are state listed and endangered under Hawaii revised statute, and or federally listed as endangered or threatened under the Federal Endangered Species Act. These 4 species, which make up the covered species, are the following: the Hawaiian hawk, the Hawaiian goose, the Hawaiian petrel, and the Hawaiian hoary bat. The following table summarizes the cumulative observed take of the proposed covered species. As of today, 2 Hawaiian hoary bats have been taken by the facility. A draft HCP was submitted for agency review on July 2022, and final agency comments were submitted in September. The applicant is currently working on incorporating agency staff comments, and a revised draft is expected to be submitted to both the service and DOFA during the Q2 of 2023. Overall, the main recommendations included that the applicant request a higher level of take than what was proposed in the HCP in order to avoid any future non-compliance scenario, and that the Bandrum storm petrel should be added as a covered species. No comments were provided regarding minimization and mitigation measures, since this section of the HCP was not included for review and is still in the planning stages. Canine assisted fatality monitoring began on January 8 of 2022 and is ongoing. Fatality monitoring of the site is conducted every week for every turbine. The search radius of the turbine monitoring plots is 45 meters, and the search radius of the 50-meter meteorological tower monitoring plot is 25 meters. These monitoring plots are mowed weekly on the day following the storage. In addition, a down wildlife monitoring summary report for 2022 is in progress and will be submitted to the agencies when finalized. It would also be appended in the next draft HCP submitted for review. Now we will be moving on to a different project site. This would be Pakini Nui. The applicant for this project is Tahiri Power LLC. They own and operate the Bikini Nui Wind Farm, which is a 20.5 megawatt operational wind energy facility near South Point on the island of Hawaii. It consists of 14 General Electric 1.5 megawatt SE turbines. Construction of the project began in August of 2006 and was completed in April of 2007. The project began operations on April 3 of 2007. The following map shows the Bikini Nui Wind Farm project location. The green triangle is the meteorological tower. The white circles are the turbines. The red line is the tide line. The black line is the project road. And finally, the two yellow squares are the operations and maintenance buildings. Incidental take authorization for a period of 10 years from the date of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the LNR authorization. This covers the anticipated remaining operating life of the project that as of April 4 of 2019 is 8 years, as well as the decommissioning stage. Should a new power purchase agreement be installed instated after the remaining operating life of 8 years, a new HCP and ITL application will be created. Tahiri has determined that the Bikini Nui Wind Farm has the potential for incidental take of 3 species due to continuing operations of the project. All 3 species are state and federally listed. The 3 species which make up the covered species are the following, and the requested take amount is listed. It would be the Hawaiian hoary bat with a requested take of 26 bats, the Hawaiian petrel with a requested take of 3 petrels, and the Hawaiian goose with a requested take of 3 nene. Please note that on September 3 of 2019, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued an incidental take permit for this 3 covered species. The ITP covers the incidental take of this 3 covered species over a 10-year permit term. The following table summarizes the observed and calculated take for all covered species. As you can see, only an observed take of a Hawaiian hoary bat has been reported, with a total observed and calculated take of 14 Hawaiian hoary bats. No take of petrel and of the Hawaiian goose has occurred. At the January meeting, the ESRC approved Tahiri's HCP and recommended the Board of Land and Natural Resources approve Tahiri's incidental take license. In response to Tahiri's request to be added to the April 9, 2020 Board of Land and Natural Resources agenda for approval, HCP staff stated that submittals to the board are accompanied by information about the project's associated EA and EIS. At that time, the only item in those files was a 2006 request for exemption for the wind farm, which may for the wind farm. In response, Tahiri has submitted an official letter to demonstrate its compliance with HRS 342, and DOFA staff is currently under consultation with the AG and other subject matter experts regarding this topic. Consequently, since legal consultation is ongoing, DOFA is going to refrain from making any comments or providing any more details. Canine-led searches replaced human-led searches on July 7, 2017, and this search method continues to be used to date. Searcher efficiency and care trials were initiated on May of 2021 and have continued to date consistent with the compliance monitoring provisions of the federal HCP. Acoustic monitoring will begin after the issuance of the ITL, since this is only a requirement under the ITL and not the ITP. Now I will present the minimization measures that Pekinui has implemented at the project site. No top strand barbed wire was used within the project to reduce the entanglement that may be caused to the Hawaiian hoary bats. No open water spaces were created that may attract the Hawaiian hoary bats. In addition, an interim curtailment program was implemented at the project in March 2014. As directed by the program, turbines are curtailed year-round between the hours of 6 to 6:30 p.m. and 6:30 to 7 a.m. Turbines shut down and the blades are pitched to 80 degrees if the 10-minute average wind speed is 5.0 meters per second or less, and start back up if the 10-minute average wind speed is greater than or equal to 5.5 meters per second. This curtailment regimen will continue for the life of the ITP. Now on to mitigation status. To date, Tahiri has not yet, Pekinui has not yet been able to secure approval of its memorandum of agreement with the National Park Service for the bat mitigation project. In April of 2020, the National Park Service informed Pekinui that a cultural landscape inventory and environmental assessment had to be prepared pursuant to NEPA before the MOA for the Hawaiian hoary bat mitigation project could be executed. The MOA for the mitigation project cannot be issued until the MPS has completed its NEPA environmental review. According to the MPS, the cultural landscape inventory has been returned to the MPS for comments and it's currently under internal review. Pekinui is not aware of MPS of the National Park Service timeline for completion on this issue. On the other hand, the Memorandum of Understanding with the State of Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife for the NENA mitigation project has gone through several rounds of revisions by both parties. Finalization of the MOU requires that the board approves the HCPs first before the mitigation project can be executed. The MOA with the National Park Service for the Hawaiian petrel mitigation was executed and mitigation began on October 1 of 2021. Now we'll be moving on to Lalomilo. Lalomilo Wind Farm is located near the town of Kamuela, South Kohala District on the Big Island. The wind farm was originally constructed in the mid-1980s with 120 turbines for a nameplate generating capacity of 2.7 megawatts. The original wind farm was decommissioned in 2010 in anticipation of repowering the site. The County of Hawaii Department of Water Supply awarded Lalamilo Wind Company a contract to design, build, and operate the wind farm and associated facilities for the Lalamilo Wind Farm repowering project on the island of Hawaii. Although the nameplate generating capacity of the project is 3.3 megawatts, the Lalamilo Parker water well system using the power only requires 1.98 megawatts. Therefore, in accordance with the power purchase agreement, Lalamilo only operates 3 turbines at any one time. Following map indicates where Lalamilo Wind Farm is located, and the red square is the proposed permitted area where you will find the 5 turbines at the project site. Lalamilo is seeking an incidental take authorization for a period of 20 years from the effective date of the authorization. This covers the contract term of the power purchase agreement between Lalamilo and the Department of Water Supply. At an appropriate time before the completion of the 20-year term of the power purchase agreement between the Department of Water Supply and Lalamilo, the Department of Water Supply will then evaluate whether to continue the operation of the project or decommissioning of it. If the operation is continued, Lalamilo, or the then owner or operator of the project, will apply for an ITL permit extension. Lalamilo has determined that incidental take of 2 federally and state listed species would occur as a result of the operation of the project. This includes the Hawaiian hoary bat and the Hawaiian petrel. The following table summarizes the observed take, the cumulative observed take of the proposed covered species. And as you can see, 2 Hawaiian hoary bats have been reported. As directed by the agencies, Lalamilo has been working to separate the next HCP draft with site-specific data. To that end, Lalamilo has been conducting weekly canine-assisted down wildlife searches, including searcher efficiency trials at all 5 turbine sites, October 21 of 2022. They have also completed care trials in the 2022 and 2023 wet seasons, implemented a scavenger trapping program, and raised the low wind speed curtailment cutoff to 6.0 meters per second. In addition, the resulting down wildlife monitoring summary report will be submitted to Delphi US Fish and will be appended to the next HCP draft. As has been previously conveyed to the agencies, Lalamilo is working under operational constraints. They have been directed by the agencies to complete 1 year of their monitoring program to inform the take requests, and currently this data collection is in progress. The focus of the preparation of the HCP will then occur in the year 2024. Thank you for your attention, and I will open this for any questions that the members might have.
Thank you. Especially a big thank you, Mina. As I mentioned before, Mina's not feeling very well and was very proactive in doing that pre-recording last night so that she could share today. We really appreciate it, Mina. So because just a reminder, this is a non-action agenda item, and these are informational briefings. So we're just mostly looking for clarifying, if the committee members have any clarifying questions that they would like to pose to the applicants. Melissa, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious. This Big Island, I know there's some colonies of band rump storm petrels. I didn't see them on some of the lists of species. I'm just wondering why those were omitted.
Yeah, especially for Pakini Nui, because that was a point of discussion when they came before ESRC.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. First, I wanted to clarify that we have the 3 separate projects, and so if we can keep the questions to the 3 separate projects as they were presented, that'd be helpful in avoiding any confusion between the projects. Yeah, for Pakini Nui, that's they are not a covered species in the HCP.
Sorry, and why is that?
Because, well, as we discussed when we were at the ESRC meeting in 2020 for approval of the HCP, we don't consider the risk to be the risk of impact to be significant enough to warrant including it as a covered species.
That was a long time ago, but I thought I remember discussing some amendments and voting in favor of it contingent upon those amendments being added. And I thought inclusion of band rump storm petrel was one of those things that I said I wanted, my vote was contingent upon.
Yeah, and the amendments were related to including some language on if a band rump storm petrel fatality was found at the site, that mitigation would be initiated and a amendment would be sought for the HCP, and those are included in the HCP.
Is that yeah, I mean, again, mechanics of this I might be getting lost in, but is there a reason why you wouldn't just include it as like a tier 1 or 2 or 3 or something type of action where like it's already written into it, so then you don't have to have that delay that would happen when you come back to us and make an amendment, which can take a while. Essentially, can it be built in so once a fatality is detected, it triggers all of those actions?
That was decided when the HCP was approved. The mechanism as it is described.
So yeah, were you representing all 3 of these?
Our team is working on all 3 of these HCPs, yes.
Okay, I had a question about the Javi one. And Javi is spelled with kahakos over both the A and the I, so I'm not sure if the company misspells it or if that's the staff's misspelling it, but being the Hawaiian representative, I would voice again that I hope that all Hawaiian place names are spelled properly. So the table had 2 bats. My understanding was there was take prior to anything being finalized. So at what point is this 2 bats in the history of the project or 2 bats from a certain date until now?
Hi, I can speak to that. So we instituted weekly canine assisted searches in January of 2022. And so those 2 bats have been found since those have been instituted. There have been other protocols of searching prior to that, and no bats have been found. There have been no bat fatalities, but this is the first time that we're doing weekly canine assisted searches with the bias trials. and that's when they were found.
Thank you. And can somebody clarify who's spelling the name wrong of Hobby? Is it the company or is it the?
No, Kawika, it was me. Thanks for your comment. I'll take that in consideration for the next time.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the committee about those 3 projects? Okay, any questions from the public?
No questions or comments.
Okay, thanks, Miana. Then I think we're done. Thank you, Amanda and Jap. The next one on the agenda is the Kwainene Island-wide Habitat Conservation Plan update. But Kate already gave an update in item 1. So if there are no, I don't think, Kate, do you have anything else to add to that, or should we just go to questions?
I don't at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone have any questions about the Kwainene HCP development?
I'm sorry, can you do just a quick reminder of the update that was provided before and then what we're doing with it right now?
We aren't doing anything with it yet. It was a heads up that you will be seeing it shortly. We're going to try to make significant progress in the next few months. It's been on the back burner for a while. And we've sort of fleshed out a plan for moving forward. And we just wanted to let you guys know that it's coming. It may be something I can stick on the agenda for the meeting I'm about to send out a doodle poll for late April.
Okay, so nothing to discuss then in this meeting?
Nope.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If that's all, I'll move on to the next one, which is the Safe Harbour Agreement for the reintroduction of the endangered orange-black damselfly to the island of Lanai. And we have Rachel and John Sprague.
Great, thank you so much. Can you enable participant sharing for me?
I cannot. Kate or Miana, can you do that for me?
Yeah, John, you should now be able to share a presentation.
Great, thank you so much. All right, can you see it okay? All right, great. Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is John Sprague, and I am one of the co-directors for the Conservation Department with Pulama Lanai on the island of Lanai. Next to me, slightly off screen, is Dr. Rachel Sprague, who's the other co-director for the department. And we're really excited to be here today to talk about a safe harbor agreement application that we've been working on with DLNR and FISH over the last little bit. And the purpose of the safe harbor application is to support the reintroduction of an extirpated endangered species to the island of Lanai, namely Megalagron xanthomelis. And the document will help to define the conservation measures and the roles of the different partners to achieve this shared restoration and enhancement vision, as well as to define some of the assurances and some limited incidental take of covered species on covered land as a result of the recovery actions. And hopefully all these things put together will ultimately provide an important net conservation benefit for the species as a whole. I wanted to start off at the outset here by recognizing that the reason why DLNR and the service have approached us about this reintroduction, I think, is relatively straightforward. It's an important part of the recovery of the species. But I wanted to cover briefly why Pulama Lanai was interested in being a part of this partnership. And it really comes down to our core mission statement, which is to build a sustainable future for the island of Lanai, which includes the stewardship of the land, its species, and its biocultural diversity. And this is not an empty mission statement. Over the last 10 years, the Conservation Department with Pulama Lanai has grown to include 24 permanent staff. And I put this sort of organizational chart up not to go over in detail, but for your reference later on. But we serve in roles that are served by other partner entities in other places, such as the Plant Extinction Prevention Program, Snail Extinction Prevention, Invasive Species Committee, additional biosecurity on top of HDOA, USDA, APHIS responsibilities, marine mammal, turtle, and seabird response, as well as managing hunting for 2 non-native introduced ungulate species on 90,000 acres. And that's not necessarily a fully encompassing list. But if I were to distill our general responsibilities within the department down to 3 themes, it's preventing things that aren't here from getting here in the first place, so biosecurity. It's about controlling the invasive species that have become established on this island to the best of our ability and or managing the damage that they do. And also protecting and monitoring native species and habitat that call Lanai home. And a key portion of that has been working with threatened and endangered species. So to highlight a few of the projects that the Conservation Department has spearheaded over the last 10 years, we have just finished in the last week an 80-acre predator-proof fence up on Hi'i. This is a fence that is around a substantial proportion of our Uwa'u colony. That's the Hawaiian petrel. Lanai is home to about 1/3 of the remaining population of this particular species, and we're really excited about this fence. This was in cooperation with NIFWIF. We also constructed 2 pakahuli. So these are snail fences that are protecting our 2 listed snail species, Parcellina semicarinata and Parcellina variabilis, in addition to serving as a predator-free space for outplanting rare and endangered plants. We manage over 800 A24 rat traps on the landscape, in addition to over 100 cat traps to manage those 2 predators, which can impact birds, snails, and plants. And then lastly, we have an entire network of over a dozen fenced units to protect our 20+ endangered and threatened plant species, including a relatively healthy population of Abutilon menziesii that's doing okay over here. And we've done all of this work under a whole variety of agreements and partnerships that honestly have been absolutely critical to our ability to do this work. It includes an MOU with the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is now, I want to say, into its 8th year, in addition to a variety of recovery, salvaged, protected wildlife, rare plant, depredation rehabilitation, and Section 6 authorization letters from both the feds and the state. And the point I want to make here and really kind of drive home is that entering into this safe harbor is a natural extension of the conservation and recovery work that has been underway over the last 10 years with Pulama Lanai, and that we hope to continue seeing go forward. So next, I want to cover a little bit about the background of and status of the species. This may be old information for some of you, but it's worth having in here just to get a good baseline. So Megalagrion is endemic to all of the Hawaiian Islands except for Kaho'olawe. At one point, it was one of the most abundant damselfly species within the state. Unfortunately, since then, it has been extirpated from Kauai and Lanai, and is currently known from a limited number of populations on Oahu, Maui, Molokai, and Hawaii Islands. The populations on Oahu and Maui are pretty small and not terribly abundant, and there is some local abundant populations on Molokai and Hawaii Island. But the recovery plan really highlights that for this species to be doing well, it needs to be established on the other islands, including the island of Lanai. In terms of range-wide species threats, it's pretty straightforward. Habitat loss, including loss of wetlands, anchoring pools, and stream habitat is an ongoing concern. Channelization and dewatering, diverting of streams, and certainly anthropogenic impacts of agricultural and urban development, in addition to feral ungulates and invasive plants, have all played their role. Particularly though in its breeding habitat, predation by non-native species, especially fish, have been particularly impactful, as has predation by backswimmers and hydra. On Lanai, the last known populations were threefold. And there was a population in Maunalei Gulch that was associated with a leaking water line. There were a couple of isolated populations in brackish semi-brackish water along the Keeaumoku coast, along the windward side of Lanai, and then up at the artificial ponds at the Koele Golf Course. And unfortunately, as of 2019, surveys done by Dan Polhemus and Will, unfortunately didn't find any extant individuals on the island, which is why we're presuming them to be extirpated. The reason for this is unfortunately, the broken water transmission pipe is no longer flowing. We've seen mangroves start to overtake and dominate some of the freshwater sources along the windward side. And up at the Koele Golf Course, unfortunately, ongoing colonization of predatory fish into those systems, as well as drainage and reconfiguration, probably leading contributors to their extirpation on island. Fortunately, because of research and work done by Will and Cynthia and Dan and a whole bunch of other folks, we do know a bit about what damselflies like. And so we have a way forward for reintroduction and supporting habitat. They prefer sort of low elevation hot habitats, but on Lanai, they were certainly found at least up to 1,600 feet, which is the elevation of the Koele population and ponds. They need pools of standing water for 2+ months in which they can have their naiads develop. And those pools need to be predator-free. But fortunately, they have a wide range of habitats, and this includes streams, wetlands, ankling pools, and they have a fairly broad physiological tolerance to a variety of abiotic water conditions. So they're not too picky so long as they're not getting eaten. So that's a little bit about sort of Pulama Lanai, the conservation department, as well as some of the background of the species. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now so she can talk a little bit more in detail about some of the conservation measures we want to put in place and the agreement itself.
I'm not as tall as John. I gotta turn it down. Okay, that's a little better. Good morning again. Like John said, I'm Rachel Sprague. I'm the other co-director of conservation for Pulama Lanai. And so, like John said, building on all of what we know about damselflies and some of our existing partnerships, we have been working with DLNR and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and species experts to develop a project description for a restoration area. This would be an area on Lanai that would be habitat suitable for reintroduction of endangered orange-black Hawaiian damselfly, safe habitat for Hawaiian stilts, because we know that if we build habitat that's suitable for damselflies, we may also have other listed species showing up, and we want to make sure that whatever we construct is not a sink for them. This would also need to be a site that is ungulate free. And once you have a site that's ungulate free, you've now had an area that's not just good for potentially some artificial ponds for damselflies, but also a good area for native dry shrubland outplanting. Once you start doing that, you usually also, in our case, should expect that you may start seeing other native pollinator insects, in particular in some of our native outplantings, just on Ilima and Abulan menziesii, which is endangered. We've seen Simulon's yellow-faced bees, which are listed, show up at some of our restoration sites. From where? Just out on the landscape. And then also a restoration area would be an accessible location to engage and educate local community and visitors about native species. So this is where we are looking at the red dot encircled by the large green circle on Lanai. This is a relatively small area. We're talking about probably a 3-acre area just off Manele Road, near the Hi'i access road. The map on the right is a zoomed in map of the location. This is actually pulled from the National Wetlands Inventory. Some of this area was identified in the National Wetlands Inventory as a seasonally flooded, human diked and impounded wetland based on 1976 surveys. We've done a wetland assessment and have concurrence from the Army Corps that no wetland features currently exist, but this is a location that has good sunlight and is going to be a good area for a restoration site. This is what it currently looks like. It is currently dominated by Formosan koa. We've had our botanists and others walk through there. There are no native plants that we can find, even common species observed at this site. we would expect that as we start taking down the Formosan koa in other areas, we have seen plants such as Uhaloa and Ilima and Ali'i start naturally coming back from the seed bank. But this was area that was former ag land in the pineapple plantation and has been disturbed and disrupted for many years. So this is a bit of an area that's starting from scratch, but it does give us the ability to manage and control some of the factors there. So the proposed activities that that our draft safe harbor agreement is going to walk through include activities such as constructing artificial habitat ponds in an ungulate and predator-proof fenced area. These are two depictions of the kinds of habitats that Megaligrene xanthomelis actually really likes, which is small cattle troughs, small tubs. We will be trying to go with something larger than this. We've been already talking with the Megaligrene working group and Will and Cynthia to think about what those ponds would look like. Again, but larger, but essentially starting with landscaping ponds that can be closely managed. I want to make a note that DOFA, under their Section 6 agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, would be collecting, transporting, and reintroducing the damselflies themselves under their permits and authorizations. We would be managing the restoration site, including doing restoration outplanting of native species in the area, maintaining vegetation and weed management, both on the terrestrial and around the edges of the ponds, and doing predator control. Again, that is for the potential vertebrate species that we might attract. And so even though everything we've largely been talking about thus far is about Megaligrene xanthomelis, we are looking at requesting coverage for 4 listed species, all of which I've already mentioned, that might find a safe home in this restoration area, including Hawaiian stilt, Hawaiian coot, Simulons, yellow-faced bees, and the target species, which is the damselfly. I want to note here that we have done assessments, our own surveys, as well as with the service and DLNR, and thus far at the restoration area, the baseline for all of these species would be 0. We've been working with the service and the state, again, on coming up with appropriate minimization and avoidance measures for our restoration activities. These are just examples. The draft of the Safe Harbor Agreement that we will be submitting is going to go into quite a bit more detail, but some of them are fairly obvious, like you can avoid, potential impacts to stilts or damselflies if you construct your fence in your ponds prior to reintroducing the damselflies or prior to having water present. So we shouldn't be seeing any stilts there. We have not seen them, knock on wood, out in the middle of the old ag fields. Would be doing things like surveying buffers of any management work. That would be like weed removal or that kind of thing to avoid covered species. And if you did find covered species there, you would provide a buffer and not conduct that work. We've got a fair bit of detail of thinking about management of ponds because we are understanding that these would be artificial habitats. So we want to be careful to make sure that any plants that we're removing at or near the water line would be going into covered containment if they're needing to be removed from the ponds for water quality or other management issues to allow any damselfly eggs that are present to hatch. Obviously, if we had nesting Hawaiian stilts or coots, that would be kind of exciting because right now the only other places they have to nest are the the county wastewater facility and an auxiliary facility. And then just we know we're dealing with trees and we know there's Hawaiian hoary bats all over. And so those are some relatively easy BMPs to avoid potential take of hoary bats. Getting into the next step of thinking about, okay, so if we reintroduce an extirpated species, thinking about what are the other activities that from the landowner's perspective, we want to make sure that we are helping to maintain. We would be requesting to cover other covered lands. And so these are areas that are, you can see are highlighted here. They're relatively small in other areas of the island. And what these other lands have in common is that they are generally not that close to the restoration site. So we don't expect them to be colonized by the damselflies. They may be visited, but they are things like stormwater or overflow ditches that are meant to move water, not retain them for those months necessary for naiad development. All of them have either their reservoirs or ponds with significant populations of non-native fish, which are the predators to damselfly naiads, or they are commercial facilities that are like active open sewage treatment ponds that even when damselflies lived on the island before did not establish populations in those areas, or for instance, ponds that have been that are continually treated with aquatic biocides for cosmetic or other human health reasons, like resort water features. So this is a list of the other covered lands. It's an auxiliary wastewater reclamation facility, the 2 Four Seasons resorts, the Manele wastewater treatment facility that's associated with the Four Seasons, a R1 reclamation reservoir, and then two areas that have some stormwater management, but no standing water. These are 2 examples. This is the features down by the coast, the Four Seasons Resort Lanai with the water features highlighted. That golf course actually doesn't have water features, but we would be including it in case they did in the future. And there's their little wastewater facility next to it. And then the image on the right is looking at what we call the auxiliary reclamation facility. It's taking effluent from the county wastewater plant and running it through additional water hyacinth ponds and some UV and other treatments so that it can be used on old golf course lands and that kind of thing. These are some example photos of these areas. It's, again, they're not ideal for damselflies now because of the fish issues and the water treatment issues. Same with the reservoirs, they're not ideal locations. And in all of these areas, the reasons to include them in the safe harbor agreement are because of the need to maintain their ability to manage those features for human health, for either water treatment or for commercial reasons, including potentially, wanting to remove an artificial pond that's like under, or drain it, that's under the activity, or what is that, the Adventure Tower up at the Adventure Center near the Four Seasons. And in all of these cases, again, there would be minimization and avoidance in place where there would be staff trained in field identification, conducting surveys, and consulting with appropriate DLNR and service staff prior to activities, any of those management activities commencing. So with all of the minimization and avoidance related to the recovery actions and the conservation protection actions, there still is the potential for limited take due to activities like transferring plant vegetation or draining and refilling the restoration area ponds, or weed removal, predator control, or with the commercial water feature and wastewater management activities. We know that it is difficult to monitor incidental take of damselflies. And so we've been working with the service and DOFA to develop language to describe reporting for that incidental take that's based on reporting the extent and frequency of the management activities, and including all take associated with those activities when they occur. Obviously, we will be touching on monitoring, not just for compliance of the activities that could result in take, but also monitoring for damselfly adults. Because again, the hope here is that we would be establishing a self-sustaining population, and that would be, so monitoring for adults of damselflies, and including monitoring of the other covered species like Stilton coots and Dissimulans yellow-faced bees, and making sure that the ponds themselves are in good shape and keeping track of some of the water quality parameters. And then obviously with the other covered lands, which are those commercial and wastewater related lands, that would be pre-maintenance and management activity monitoring. And we've been working again with the service and DOFA on adaptive management measures to respond in particular to the sort of potential health of the damselfly population and any changes in wastewater we might see. So with all of the restoration activities, the minimization and avoidance, and even with covering some limited incidental take at these other covered lands, we do expect net conservation benefits for this species in the form of new habitat that's protected and free of predators. Ideally and hopefully, I think establishment of a new population of orange-black damselfly, as well as fenced and predator-free habitat and surface water for Hawaiian coot and stilt that currently does not exist on this island. Forage cover and protected habitat for our Semillon's yellow-faced bees, increased ranges for all of these species to help prevent against catastrophic loss, decreased predator populations and abatement of, in general, ecological damage by ungulates, and increased collaborative recovery efforts between the service and DLNR and Pulama Lanai. And just to, and increased opportunities for environmental education and conservation public outreach about these species that are otherwise sort of challenging to connect the public with. So just to share with you where we are, we have spent about a year and a half, 2 years on development of the project and all of the parameters of minimization and avoidance and language with the Fish and Wildlife Service and DOFA experts and biologists. And we've run those drafts through preliminary review with the agency biologists and solicitors. And we are currently in revisions to those, which the last draft did not have too much for us to work on, and are reviewing it with our lawyer, at which point we are expecting to be ready to submit to DOFA and the Fish and Wildlife Service relatively shortly. So thank you very much. I know it was covering a lot of information, but this is a project that we are obviously very excited about and are happy to answer any questions that you might have now.
Thank you, John and Rachel. Do we have any questions from the committee? Oops, where's my camera? There we are.
Rachel, do you mind, thank you for the presentation, you and John both. I'm wondering if you can just slide back in the presentation to where you talked about, there's something about like excluding the coots and gallinules from the pond versus like exclusion devices or something like that. I just wanted to ask about those.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just want to briefly note, Michelle rejoined at 11 a.m.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, it was earlier in the talk.
I don't think I
may have misunderstood.
Well, it might be easier to describe. So we don't plan on excluding the species from the recovery area. We anticipate that the species might be actually attracted to the area. Right. I think the concern that we have is that none of our recovery actions for the damselflies in the recovery area have any unnecessary take on water birds that could find that habitat as well. The thing that I think would be worth also stating explicitly here is that the recovery area is not designed specifically for water birds. It is specifically designed for damselflies. We just think there are these other species that may show up because, as we all know, stilts will show up at a puddle if it hangs around long enough. And so we want to make sure that we're just taking into account that possibility, given that they do fly around and they may find it.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Lyle, go ahead.
Thanks. Question. So what's the language going to be with respect to returning to baseline for the safe harbor agreement?
We'd have to pull that up.
Yeah, I guess what are you look? I'm sorry, I'm trying to think about I think so far we're working with this sort of the standard language that was in the service and DOFA safe harbor agreements historically. I'm trying to remember if there's any language about returning to baseline other than identifying what the current baseline is, which is no damselflies. I think we may say if there would be notification to the service in DLNR if there were to be a return to baseline at the end of the agreement, and there would be time and access allowed for removal of any individuals if the service or DLNR so desired, something along those lines.
Okay, and I know that you had reasons for going with the site that you're looking at, and the only site I've seen there with damselflies was there at the lodge. Okay, and I'm not sure exactly why they went away or what changed other than having some predatory fish come in, but you had also mentioned some coastal areas, and was there a reason for not going with those? Because those would actually have a water supply that you probably could deal with, right, if they were angling pools. So is that just too hard to do, or what?
Sure. So it came down a bit to access and knowing that the population was extant at that elevation gradient, it seemed to make sense to go with a higher elevation site. In terms of water, while there could be appropriate water sources along the coast with some significant remediation of that coastline, it isn't currently extant. And at the site that we chose, it's actually just adjacent to a water line that we can tap into to provide a water source on site very easily. So in discussion with the service and DLNR, they really recommended going with a site that would be relatively easy to maintain, especially for artificial habitat like this is, over going with an area that was perhaps more appropriate in a free-ranging population.
Yeah, and I will add that the coastal areas are not anchoring pools. They're like kind of overwashed combinations of stormwater with ocean overwash into them that are now currently all full of fish. Kiahi and Will and Dan have done surveys up and down, and they found some non-native damselflies, but as far as I know, don't feel very good about the long-term persistence or control over those sites. There's no water lines. We wouldn't be able to add any water. There's no facilities or power down any of the Keeaumoku side. So I think, yeah, our thought was that if we could show that we could establish a self-sustaining population in habitat where we could consistently monitor and consistently be able to make sure that there's not going to be like those drainages on the windward side only flow in high storm, and so they're impossible to control, like floodwaters pushing everything out into the ocean. And I think would feel more comfortable starting with something that was more controllable, and maybe like amending an agreement and moving on from there into a next phase if we could demonstrate just the initial establishment of a population.
Okay. Thank you. I just have concerns with it. If you need a population on Lanai to have this population isn't going to be it if it can go back to a baseline of 0. That's my concern with a safe harbor on a species where this is it. This is the only location.
Rachel and John, I don't know if you saw the revised or the proposed new Section 10 regs from the Fish and Wildlife Service. It just went out in the Federal Register last month. This is Fish and Wildlife Service specific, and there's no concurrent approach within DOFA, but it might give some additional flexibility related to how you want to look at a return to baseline, and might give some other ideas for how that return to baseline portion of the safe harbor agreement could look.
Yeah, I mean, we will note that we don't intend to return to baseline. It is definitely a challenge, and I recognize this, for reintroduction of a species to an island where it once was, where I think it's probably can be agreed that the habitats where it was in a couple golf course ponds that like fish got into the R1 and like into the R1 reservoir. And because people were, I don't even know who, like we've got fish in every pond that's not even a real water facility. Or like, I don't understand how every pond down the Kamoku Road has mosquito fish in it. Somebody went and dumped mosquito fish in every single little pond that we've found. You know, ideally they would get back up into some of where the water is up on the mountain. I think this species has always liked slightly lower elevation and more sun than some of the other damselflies. And I don't know if that habitat exists anymore. And I think the problem is it doesn't exist on a lot of the other islands either. And that in, you know, in our work with the service and the state, we felt like we could create a protected population that could serve as a nursery, as some genetic insurance for some other areas where the species is in decline. Maybe this isn't the best long-term place for them forever. But if we want to see them on this island again, I think starting with artificial habitat is the only way that's going to happen.
I think you're muted, Lo.
Sorry, I was trying to cut down on background noise. So it seems like almost like a conservation agreement. Recovery conservation agreement would kind of work instead of a safe harbor, but then you have those other species that could come in that would make that complex, because you'd just be focusing on doing a damselfly project, but there's other considerations, I guess.
Well, and they need to take coverage for if they show up in inappropriate areas, right? Like the water treatment sites or the pond or the golf course ponds.
Right. I'm just not sure you couldn't cover that through an agreement as well, conservation agreement as well.
We could on the federal side, but there's no equivalent process within 195D.
Yeah, because I'd have to go back and look at that again.
Bob, did you have a question? No, oh, sorry. I saw you turned your camera on. Any other questions?
No questions for me. Thanks for the great presentation.
All right. Thank you. Oh, any questions from the public?
No questions or comments.
Great. Thanks, Mina.
Well, thanks to all y'all. Again, this is still in process, so if you want to reach out and ask questions, this is the right time to do it. And we're honestly genuinely really excited about this project and moving it forward. So input is more than welcome, and hopefully we'll be back to you guys in a little while here with an actual application, and we can start talking over some of the brass tacks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, John. Okay, we've got one more item on the agenda. I just wanted to check to see if the committee would like, well, it's 11:34, so is it okay? Well, first question is, do we want to push on and finish up or take a lunch break? And the second question is, do you want to take a short break right now before we move on to agenda item 4?
I'm not sure how long this discussion will take. If it doesn't take long, I just assume get it over with and do it. But okay. I don't know. I don't have a clue really.
Yeah, I don't either. Maybe we can take a quick break now and go forward with item 4. And if it does take longer, we can then take a recess and then come back to it after lunch. How does that sound?
It works for me.
Okay, so should we take a 5-minute break now? It's 11:35 and come back at 11:40? Okay,
Okay.
thanks. See you then. All right. Let's see. Do we have Bob and Melissa back? Bob, are you there? We've got, well, there's 4. I saw Michelle earlier. Oh, there's Bob. Looks like we lost Kavika, unfortunately. I think that happened maybe sometime in the past hour, which is unfortunate because this was, I think, one of the things he was wanting to hear about, but yeah, I guess we'll have to move on. So the next item is item 4, the permitted interaction groups, acronym PIGS. And we have Cindy here, Cindy Young from the AG's office, to give us an overview of what is a permitted interaction group and how it works. And as mentioned at the beginning, we're not going to be doing a vote on this at this point. That will have to happen later when we provide more information on the agenda. So thank you. Go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you, Chair. A permitted interaction group is one of the several types of permitted interactions that is allowed pursuant to HRS section 92-2.5. Specifically, this particular permitted interaction group is under subsection B1. And so one of the things is it requires a 3-meeting arc at a minimum, because in order to create a permitted this investigative permitted interaction group, which, by the way, would comprise of either 2 or 3 members of your committee, because it's 2 or more members of a board, but less than quorum. So in your case, it would be 2 or 3. So in order to create the permitted interaction group, you would, at your initial meeting, have to set out the scope of this group, okay? And that would include which members are included in the group, what are their roles, and what are they tasked with investigating? What is the scope of the investigation? Okay, that's all in the first meeting. Under an agenda item, that would have to be sufficient enough to know kind of what this falls under, a particular HCP or something of that nature. So, and then after that meeting, okay, the second, a subsequent meeting, right, which would be the second one for this group, that group would need to report to the committee its findings and recommendations from that investigation. They would report it back to this committee. But at that meeting, again, it has to be duly agendized for that purpose. But at that meeting, there could not be deliberation decision making. So not a whole lot of discussion. Certainly you would take testimony if there is any, but there certainly could not be deliberation decision making, not a lot of discussion really for that matter. And then at a subsequent meeting, the third meeting, that's where there would be the discussion, deliberation, and decision on the item for which is being for which the investigation is occurring. So let's say it's for a habitat conservation plan, for example, then you could vote on that habitat conservation plan with all of that investigative findings and etc. It's not the quickest process, I will say, because again, it's the 3 meetings. But that's a short overview of what a permitted interaction group is.
Okay, thank you.
Lainey, is this the same process that was used to create the BAT task force? Do you know, or is this something different?
I believe it was. I wasn't there when it was created, but I think it was, yeah.
Okay. Loyal, do you happen to recall?
I'm not sure what the actual mechanism was, but that's kind of what they laid out to us, was the ESRC would set up the task force, gave us a task that although it wasn't intended just to go out and talk to people, it was more to work with species experts and stuff and then get back. So I honestly don't know what the actual mechanism was that was done. It was similar to this, but I'm not sure it's the same thing. So maybe under a different
I don't remember it being
scenario.
called a pig, but it sure looked like a pig.
Yeah. But I think it was a little less formal than that, because we didn't have to, we came back and responded and provided something that we had done that at the request of the full ESRC. Yeah. If Jacoby's still on, he may remember. He's younger than I am.
I don't know if I'm permitted to speak.
Yeah, we'll open it up to the public. You can go ahead.
I'm glad to now be part of the public. Yes, I think Loyal described it pretty well. It was not very formalized in that sense there, although it essentially followed the same basic kind of rules. We didn't have specific 3 meetings and so forth. It was that we had a task that was assigned to the committee the group by the ESRC as a whole, and then we got back numerous times to the ESRC reporting progress. We still have not finalized that effort, and it would be very, very useful to find out whether that committee or that group continues on, or what's happening with that status report or with that revision.
Cindy, you mentioned that it has to be at least a 3-meeting arc. It can continue for as long as the task is open, correct?
Okay, so that is correct. It might be more than 3 meetings. It's a minimum of 3 meetings. What I would say is that if there are additional, if there's additional scope for the investigatory committee, it would have to go back to that first meeting, right, where you're scoping it again. If you're, say, increasing the scope of the investigative committee, but that's correct. If you're keeping with the scope as originally, as it was originally set out in that initial meeting, yes.
And then is there anything that is required to conclude a group, i.e. something that is required to confirm that the task from the initial meeting has been completed and that the group is disbanded?
Nothing really formal. It just generally it's the decision that comes for that item.
Okay.
Or that matter. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that seems like that's useful for the discussion that we had on the bat task force, for example. I'm not sure it would be a very useful process to go through if it was some people who were putting together an HCP and wanted to talk to individual or groups, small groups of ESRC members. It seems like that may be more cumbersome than anything else. And was that what the intent was to talk to this about? It wasn't clear to me what the intent of this agenda item was, whether it was the BAT task force or whether it was the request that some people had to be able to communicate with individual ESRC members on projects.
I believe it was, the latter, like whether if there's a need for additional pigs, and it was to, when we first put it on the agenda, we were planning to, talk about, and Cindy, cut me off if I'm going over too much. But I believe the original intent was, to pose to the ESRC, is there a need for groups identify particular groups and then vote on them, but then we realized that we did not agenda that sufficiently, so we are not voting today.
Okay, so let me answer it this way. Right, I mean, the overarching thing is that the sunshine law is there, and it primarily pertains to board discussions, right? And that would involve board matters that are reasonably anticipated to come before the board, in this case, the ESRC. There are other types of permitted interaction groups that are set out in 92-2.5. That would include, I'm not going to go over all of them, but they're pretty self-explanatory. But one in particular, for example, is that if there is an informational briefing of some sort, 2 or more members of the board, but less than quorum, again, so 2 or 3, may attend the informational briefing, or I'm sorry, informational meeting or presentation on matters relating to board business. And it has some examples of that. It includes seminars, for example, conventions, community meetings, provided that the meeting or presentation is not specifically and exclusively organized for or directed towards members of your board, of your committee. And the board, then so the committee members in that type of instance can participate in discussions, including discussions among the committee members themselves, provided that the discussions occur as part of that informational meeting or presentation, and also that no commitment relating to a vote on a matter that's reasonably anticipated to be before your committee is made or also sought.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And just one additional thing on the question about how you arrived at the white paper. I did text Linda, and her recollection is that you did have a permitted interaction group for that. Yes.
Yeah, she kind of helped design all of that. So, but I don't remember the acronym for sure when we were setting that up. Thank you.
I'm sorry, y'all. I think we've got a lot of different conversations going on right now about the role of ESRC and what problems there are that we're trying to solve. And I'm struggling to see exactly where this tool fits in as something that we would use to help address those challenges and concerns. What do we think?
I think it's more cumbersome than it might be worth it, but you know, I mean, there were people who I think wanted to talk individually, and if there's no good mechanism for that, then there's no good mechanism for that. And I don't have a problem with that. But I guess the question is there a way to have a more open discussion of ideas as part of an ESRC meeting? Or it sounds like our agenda items have to be very specific. We can't just say we want to know conversations about how to maybe let's do some of the topics that we talked about today. You know, could we have an open discussion at an ESRC meeting on say how much habitat is enough to request for a bat take, as an example. I'm just picking one that I know is controversial. So could we have that as a discussion topic and have people weigh in on that particular kind of topic as a time period at the ESRC, in lieu of having different, say, HCP permittees or applicants come in and try to talk to us individually? Is there a way to have a general discussion on that science topic? In the past, we've had like workshops. So we have a workshop where we bring in scientists and they go through and they run through stuff. But we do that like what, every 2 to 3 years. So if you have smaller questions or questions that you want to refine how you would actually implement that, is there some way to do that as part of an ESRC meeting? If we can't do it individually.
Laura, can I ask a follow-up question? I just got back from 2 weeks of leave and I am backlogged on emails. I saw that there was back and forth about the requests that you had received from, I'm not sure if it was permittees or applicants, but can you summarize real quickly? And I ask this because at least in practice for, gosh, as far back as I can remember, permittees and applicants were encouraged to talk to individual ESRC members. They just couldn't talk to multiple ESRC members at the same time. Is that changing? Is there something different now?
Well, I think that was one of the questions that, Lainey and others were posing, to some extent as to whether that's correct and whether people wanted to do it. And like I'm okay doing it. My preference would be to have DOFA there so that I wasn't doing something that was going to go contrary to what their management plans were and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I think that was the question that I thought maybe the pig was trying to get at. But I could be wrong on that, Michelle. And lucky you got to go on a vacation, so that was nice. So I don't know, and I think that if I'm willing to kind of say, well, what would DOFA like? If DOFA wants us to talk to them and if they want to be present, I'm happy to do that. If it's legal, if it's not legal, then, or not approved, smiled upon, I should say, then, I don't want to do it. But I don't mind talking with folks. But I don't want to screw up a management plan of DOFA's by saying something that doesn't make sense to DOFA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, appreciate that.
What I don't want to see is that take the place of a committee discussion. So for example, if they've gone and talked to folks individually and then they say, oh, everyone's approved it, that doesn't seem right. And it doesn't seem in the spirit of 195D. So I would like to see committee discussion still take place. And I think that if those individual conversations have taken place and there's a Cliff Notes version of what was discussed, that should be shared with the group as well, so that we all are working from the same information.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so that's where the discussion comes in, right? Because then a member is talking to other board member, like a committee member is talking to the rest of the committee members saying, this is what I discussed with, so-and-so about. And then if it's not in, so there is still that sunshine law aspect to it. And that's probably what I think staff was getting at. In terms of what kind of the quandaries are with respect to the sunshine law.
Yeah, and apologies if I wasn't clear. What I was trying to say is that I think that should happen then as a follow-up in an ESRC meeting, not that would take place outside of something that was clearly under the sunshine law.
Cindy, you mentioned the informational briefing, because I understand what I think what Loyal was saying is like, just to have this conversation, having to have it like for something that might, for a large action item like the white paper, then yeah, absolutely. But for just a small, I think what Loyal was saying is like, if it's just something, relatively small compared to that, it's probably maybe not worth going through that 3-meeting process. But you mentioned the informational briefing. Is that an alternative to this permitted interaction group? And could that be, maybe that's something more in line of what Loyal was thinking?
No, so not if the committee is organizing it, right? It's if somebody else is organizing it and it's for a larger audience than just the committee members, then it could be done. It cannot be where, say, staff is organizing an informational briefing on a project that is focused on the committee. That is not covered in that exemption, in that permitted interaction. That's not part of that permitted interaction. That would actually have to be an agenda item if it's something that's a matter that's going to come before the committee. Yes.
So could an example of that be like a webinar that another group is putting on and committee members could attend? Is that something like that? Is that?
I mean, I think it depends on what, I mean, yes, if the webinar is not focused on the committee and it's more just kind of a general audience, kind of a webinar, yes.
Okay.
But again, it wouldn't be all of the members, right? It would be the 2 or 3. Yeah, because yeah. So I mean, that's the other limitation is it's 2 or 3. That's what the provision sets forth.
How does that work? Like, just say another party puts on a webinar that the committee members might just be signing up for without knowing how do we manage that?
For example, how many people are registering for HCC? And I assume that we are all going to go to the ones on the major restoration issues, the forest birds, the predator control, and I would expect to see us all there. Is there, because we are all members of ESRC, Cindy, how do we handle that?
We're not allowed to talk. Discuss.
I just want to be sure, so you know the acronym HCC, Hawaii Conservation Conference.
Thank you, Kavika.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with that conference. Let me think on that. But I mean, what I would say is that the Sunshine Law is really focused on board discussion. If you're watching something, but not, if you're watching something, you're not necessarily discussing it. But let me think further on that. That's kind of my initial thought, though, is that
yeah, but sometimes
this is really focused on discussions.
There are presentations about the progress of these HCPs that happen at this conference. Seabirds especially, and forest birds, but yeah.
But maybe as long as the board, if the board members are just there in the audience but not discussing as a committee.
So let me think on that. I may contact OIP to see kind of what their thought. Let me research that and then perhaps consult with OIP. But I'm sorry, what was the acronym? It was Hawaii
Conservation Conference.
Conference. Who is it organized by?
Hawaii Conservation Alliance.
Conservation Alliance.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And
which Michelle and I are members of, and so are many other people in this committee. So there's lots of meetings where we're all together talking about these topics, but not necessarily about these HCPs specifically.
Okay. Okay, let me get back to you on that one.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, sure.
So I'm guessing that there's not, other than the fact we've got like that task force, what we've been talking about today probably isn't going to be particularly useful for us. Is that right? What do you guys think?
If it's Cindy, is it okay if I mention the groups that we had that DOFAR had thought of that might be useful, or should I save that? Is that going beyond what the agenda has sunshined?
I guess if you're talking about it in the context of what might be coming up in the future on an agenda item.
So it's okay. Okay, so we had talked about like a Nene group, a seabird group, and Oh, there was one more. I can't remember now. I don't know. Mina, do you remember?
I think a bat group, but we sort of have like the bat task force, but that's primarily for the Hawaiian Horyuat white paper. So it would be another bat group, maybe for focusing on another topic.
Okay, thanks. But I'm not sure if for those groups, if we went beyond that in terms of, well, what is the action item? What are they assigned to actually do? I don't think we went that far. I think we just felt, based on previous committee meetings, that there was a need to have more in-depth discussion regarding take on those species, but we didn't really go beyond that.
I don't think it's a bad idea, Lainey, but I would challenge us to think a little bit more broadly than just species groups, given the expertise in this committee and kind of our backgrounds. It might make more sense to do something along the lines of a project planning group, a compliance monitoring group, and an adaptive management group, or something more along the lines of the common themes and challenges that we see in these HCPs, rather than just the species expertise. We've got some great species expertise in our conservation community that are already stood up. I don't want to replicate that.
Yeah.
Bats was an unknown, right? We had some great species experts, but they weren't looking at the same things that we were looking at, which is why the bat task force was needed. But I would argue that may not be necessary for some of the other species groups.
And there's already working groups on nene and seabirds.
Yeah.
And water birds, forest birds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the process aspects of that, the compartments, as Michelle pointed out, might be useful.
I mean, that's maybe one way we could get at what you're challenged with, Loyal, of if we had a group that was specifically designated to assist applicants with planning for the submission of new requests, and have that be whatever it is, 2 or 3 members, then that's the group that is designated to help provide early assistance to those incoming applicants.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Realizing that there'd have to be kind of a caveat that the group, the ESRC group, would not be implying approval for anything, just saying this is what this means. This is how you would be putting it together. And this is the sort of information needs that the group would need, not saying you do this and yes, you get your gold star and we're going to approve it. That would not be appropriate, right?
Agreed. And none of these groups would absolve Fish and Wildlife Service or DOFA from doing their own due diligence within the agencies related to these elements.
Right. The problem I see with having that group is just you would need to have something similar to the bat white paper that you could actually be able to have for the different, or for HCPs that you could then talk about, because the white paper kind of tried to lay that out to say, if you do these sorts of things, this is the kind of information we need. You need to be able to talk to me about this, that, and the other things. And these are things that we think have already worked.
And the challenge, of course, is just that the bat white paper or anything that comes out of these groups isn't policy, right? It's not policy, not regs, it's just recommendations for helping streamline the process.
So I would suggest that, since there needs to be some follow-up discussion potentially on this, that DOFA staff say what you would like, what you think would make sense, and then come back to the ESRC and go through the steps like Cindy has nicely pointed out to us, and say, okay, let's then discuss it properly agendized that make sense? Because I'm not sure exactly how you and DOFA staff would like to actually deal with different people wanting information on HCPs or working with HCP people. So, I'm looking to you to say this is what we would prefer, and then see if the ESRC is okay with that. My thoughts. Feel free, Melissa, Kavika, Bob, or Michelle, to say no.
That makes sense to me. I think that we have always wanted the ESRC to help meet DOFA's needs. And Lainey, some of this, I think, falls to you, your team, and Dave and Dawn to identify exactly what role you want this committee to take.
Yeah, beyond
Yeah.
HCPs, yeah, which is what we tend to focus on. Yeah, definitely. And then that's come up a few times. It's been brought up by committee members, and it's also within DOFA about what else, what role should the ESRC be playing beyond review and making recommendations on HCPs.
Even for HCPs, I would say there's a pretty wide spectrum in there, and there's a lot of diversity in how this committee has been run and how it has been used in the past in terms of project development, management, compliance monitoring. And I some of this I think really does come down to what does DOFA need in order to help meet our obligations under 195D.
And the other side of that is how much is how much time do the committee members have to devote to this? I mean, we've had a lot of, I know how much time, not just the meeting itself, but all the reviewing all the material. It takes a huge amount of time of the committee members, and adding to that, it's just going to be, I could see it becoming a full-time job, and we don't, no one can do that. I know. So
but there are going to be instances where, like, when, like the BAT task force did some, looked at how to put together things for the BATs. And there are certain analytic things that we did, and say one of the permittees or applicants may have a question. Well, when you were doing your calculations on habitat needs, I see what you did. I'm not sure I understand it. And this is what I did, and you don't understand it. So how do we, sometimes you just sit down and in 20 minutes, you can figure that out. And sometimes it takes 4 years. But so it seems like there needs to be some mechanism to kind of encourage that interactions for clarity, to make sure people are using data or understanding how the data is being used for some of these recommendations or suggestions.
I think following up on that, I think there's some things we've talked about before that would make the meetings themselves more efficient to the point and help us get the information we need in a more efficient manner, allow time for the discussion within the meetings, which would be much more efficient and effective. So, for example, having some templates, when appropriate, that direct people toward, here's the requirement, here's what we did to meet it. Have we met it? Have we not met it? To the point. And not, sometimes it kind of feels like people are dragging things out just to squish the discussion time, frankly. So having things be to the point and efficient, I think would be very helpful. And the synopses that DOFA has provided in the past are very helpful, again, toward our time. But I think we ran into an issue a year ago where, things were missing from those, or folks hadn't turned in their reports on time, and so we didn't have those materials in time. So I think with the new person in place in the HCP office, and, I know there's been a gap for a little while here, all of that hopefully will help.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, Lainey, I appreciate you mentioning the time burden. Pierce has a decent number of BAT experts who might contribute to, some of these HCPs that are related to BAT take, but all but one of them is 100% soft funded, and every hour of their day is paid for by some project. So we're really limited in our ability to have staff spend a lot of time on it. And then the one person who isn't self-funded is, mostly not working in biology. So that is a challenge for us. And Michelle's saying that I sound weird. Sorry about that.
You sound far away.
I am far away.
Not weird, just in a tunnel.
Weirder.
So Lainey, maybe I'll just ask, we've talked about a number of different things that might be helpful and might be pathways for moving forward. What's the process from here to identify which of those we would use, and whose desk is it on to kind of follow up with us and check, and is this what we heard? This is what we're thinking we're going to move forward with. Does this look right? And in what form can we do that? Does it have to be in a meeting like this announced ahead of time? Is it something that paperwork can be sent out and we can say, yeah, looks good, or what's the process look like from here?
Good question. I think maybe we'll discuss within DOFA based on your feedback, which is really helpful, and maybe we'll do another update in another meeting. I'm not sure. I'm not. I need to get a bit more clarification from the staff about what we would like to see. I do think this. My understanding is that this was something that it was based on feedback we were getting from the ESRC about the need for more in-depth discussions than that we could accommodate within the committee meetings. So this was something we felt might be an option to provide. So I think we will discuss internally, what we've talked about today, and come back to you.
I think something that might be helpful, and again, I'm glad Cindy's here and can direct us on what's okay and not okay. In many of the meetings I'm in, someone is taking meeting minutes in a document that we can take a look at and say, does this accurately capture in writing what was said? And I realize there are transcripts that are auto-generated, I believe, from these meetings as well. But it would be really helpful if the action items that folks are seeing that are, okay, here's the things we're going to follow up on. And I mean, just having a clean record of that would be extremely helpful. And then a process whereby at the next meeting, we briefly look over it and say, yep, looks good, and approve the previous meeting's minutes. I mean, that's standard practice across meetings typically. So I'm just curious whether that's something we could do.
I think, when I first started at DOFA, nothing was not on Zoom, and so everything was recorded, I believe, and then we had to transcribe it for public record, and that took a really long time, and we were admittedly very, very far behind. Bye, Kavika. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. And now we're doing things are a lot easier now. We can do on Zoom and then it goes direct to YouTube. So that's our record, and it's up on YouTube. The public can access it any time. But yeah, I see your point about the minutes. I'm not sure if we used to do that. But yeah, I'll discuss that, because I've seen that obviously in board meetings, and they do the approval at the beginning from the last meeting. If it's just a brief summary, I'm sure we can do that in time for the next meeting. I see Cindy nodding, so that's a good sign.
So on Member Price's point on minutes, it used to be the case that the only way minutes were done were in writing, and it had to have certain prescribed information, which would include the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, decided, any other information that any member requested to be included in the minutes, and so on and so forth. Now, because there's a lot of meetings on Zoom or that are audio recorded, minutes will have to include the more summarized minutes would include the recording, but it would have a written summary that includes some of the same information: date, time, place of meeting, members present, the votes, and who voted for, against the motion, what that motion is also, right? And then a timestamp where each of the items is, starts within the recording, be it Zoom or audio. So it should have a motion. The written minutes should include the motion and the vote. Sometimes it may not include, if there were more comments and those types of things, it may not include that. It could include it. It's not that it can't, but subsection B within the minutes, the say more summarized minutes that include a recording and the timestamp, the required information that goes along with that is a little bit sparser because there is a recording, but it would still have to have the motion and the vote. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful, because a lot of what we do is clarification or asking if folks can tell us a little bit more about something. But there are also times that we say, I would like to see this change made. And it's not an official vote, but there are things that the committee is saying, I would like to see this, or I would like to see that. And like Loyal pointed out earlier in the meeting, or other folks, oftentimes we don't see those changes happen. And so having a clear record where we can look back and say, okay, which set of minutes was that in? And yeah, we very clearly said we wanted to see X, Y, Z. I think it'll help with some accountability that would make us all feel like our time is being well spent. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'll discuss with Mirna. This is all really good. We're happy to get this feedback and accommodate and adjust things to make them more efficient. So yeah, thank you for that. We'll come back. Yeah, I think this is really, really good information, and we'll discuss and make adjustments.
Lainey, can I be allowed to make a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the committee members for their time and their valuable input they have provided today. On another note, here at DOFA, we are aware of some action items and requests that were made on prior meetings to this one. And we just wanted to inform you that we're actively working on it, and we'll soon be reaching out to you. This includes, for example, an update on the Hawaiian Horibat white paper. And another example is the Maui Nui Safe Harbor Agreements situation. So we are actively working on that, and we'll try, with the comments you just provided today, we will make sure to take it into consideration in the next planning of our meetings and be able to plan accordingly and have a more open line of communication with you.
Okay. And I just saw a note from Bob that Bob's leaving at 12:30, although we still have Jim to substitute.
Yeah, Jim will be my backup.
Yeah, thank you.
But do we have anything else we need to talk about?
That's the last agenda item. So if we're finished, we're happy to keep chatting about this. But if not, then yeah, we could wrap up.
One unrelated question. I'm wondering if Pu'uwa'awa'a is going to be on the docket for an upcoming review.
Yes, it's an upcoming discussion. Yeah, I mean, and that was we know we've been discussing that within DOFA, and we plan to come back to the ESRC shortly. do we have any more discussion on item 4?
Just say thank you to Cindy for taking the time to help us walk through that. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Then if that's it, then I think we might, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Can we take a vote? Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. So we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. And we'll see you on